Welcome back, everyone. Today we had game number 6 in the World Chess Championship match between Liren from China and Jan Nepomniachtchi from Russia. Now, as you guys know, Nepo won a very nice game yesterday with some fantastic preparation in the closed Spanish. So today, game number 6, after Ding lost in game number 5, he has the white pieces. Would he be able to strike back? Let's jump right into the game. So here we go. All right, Liren playing with the white pieces, and he starts the game by playing 1d4. We get knight f6, knight f3, d5, and now we get the classic London opening being played by Liren. Now, it's very clear that Ding feels that Jan is extremely well prepared in a lot of the main lines, and so he wants to take him out of his preparation and into sidelines. Now, I was actually quite critical of this choice at the time when I was watching this live. I felt that it's a little bit of a dangerous choice because I assumed Nepo had looked at a lot of variations that were very sharp and which lead straightforward down a path towards a draw. So the game continues with c5. We get e3 being played, knight to c6. We get knight bd2. We get pawn takes d4, e takes d4, and bishop f5. Now, already this surprised me. I kind of thought that Jan would actually play something like queen to b6 on this move, or even a move earlier, queen b6 here. There's some very sharp lines with like knight c3 and bishop d7, which I myself have played against Magnus Carlsen and others. But we got this fairly passive line with bishop f5. Now, there's nothing wrong with this line. It's completely fine. But I do feel that for a player like Jan Nepomniachtchi, who actually does not play this pawn structure very often, it was definitely a mistake. Now, you're probably wondering, what do I mean by the pawn structure? Now, the pawn structure that we have reached is actually very similar to another opening. I'll show you from this position specifically. So on move number 1, white can play e4. Now, as we know, Liren is not playing e4 in this match, but Jan Nepomniachtchi has always played either e5 and played the Petrov, or he's played the Sicilian Najdorf very specifically with this pawn structure where black gets these pawns in a6, d6, and e6 or e5. And he's also played the French as well. So these are the 3 openings that Jan has played. However, Jan has never played, as far as I can tell, the Caro-Kann. Now, the Caro-Kann, of course, starts with e4, c6, d4, d5, and there's this exchange variation with the pawns being traded, and I'll just set up a specific position here, where you get to a position like this, where after e6, bishop f4, bishop d6, the bishops get traded, and we have an extremely similar position to the game. Now, this position is identical to the game, except for one factor. The bishop is on d3 and the bishop is on g4, whereas in the game, the bishop is on b5 and the bishop is on f5. However, this is the pawn structure that you get with the pawns on f7 towards d5 and white having the pawns going from b2 to d4. Now, again, as I said, nothing wrong with this opening situation that we get in this game. However, when we look at the position, because Jan does not play the Caro-Kann, ending up with this pawn structure makes it a little bit harder to play for someone who is not super familiar with the ideas. Additionally, Jan with the white pieces does not play either the London opening or the exchanged Caro-Kann either. So we get castles, rook to e1 played, and now we get h6. Now, this move is not a bad move, but I actually don't like it. I think that here Jan should have played a move like knight to d7, for example, trying to prevent knight e5. And white is maybe a little bit better after knight h4, bishop g6 takes, and h takes g6. But at the end of the day, you can play for f6 and e5 here. However, we get this move h6. Now we get knight to e5 being played by Jan, and now the move knight to e7. Now, black could potentially trade the knights on e5 here, but after pawn takes e5, queen to b6, e takes f6, queen takes b5. Just on first glance, it feels kind of dubious after takes, and then a move like knight b3. King is a little bit open. White can jump to the center with a knight to d4, and just in general, it doesn't really feel all that great. So instead, we get knight to e7. Now we get pawn to a4 being played by Ding. Now, Ding actually was using some time up to this point, but from this move and over the course of the next couple of moves, he actually speeds up and plays almost instantly. Now, my theory as to why this occurred in terms of why Ding was using time and then suddenly sped up is that he had probably looked at a similar position to this, maybe not this exact position, but some line that was very similar, very comparable, or comparable, I should say, and he knew that playing for a4, a5 was an idea. So Nepo plays a6, we get bishop f1, and now Nepo plays this move knight d7. Now, this is the start of completely losing the thread in the game. What Nepo should have played here is he should have played this move pawn to a5. So after white plays knight b3, you can go pawn to b6, guarding the pawn on a5, and white cannot move the knight to c5. Instead, after knight d7, Jan does not understand what Ding's concept and plan is after playing a4. Knights come off the board, and now we get pawn to a5. And now it becomes very clear what the plan is. Ding wants to put this knight on c5 and overprotect it and create the diamond hands formation. So one simple illustration of this is you get this position with knight c5 and b4, and you'll notice that black cannot remove this knight from c5. b6 will always result in a capture of the pawn. White has knight d7 forking the queen and the rook, or even frankly just taking the pawn on a6, and with the diamond hands formation, white is simply up a pawn and winning the game. So already here is getting quite critical, and now Nepo plays queen c7. Now in my live commentary I felt that at this point Nepo should have played this move knight to c8, and after knight b3, knight d6, knight c5, and queen c7, white is definitely better here with the diamond hands formation of the pawns. But that being said, you can always play knight to e4, try to trade the knights off, and potentially play for f6 and e5 or rook e8 followed by e5 later on. Instead we get this move rook f queen c7 being played, we get queen f3, and now we get the strange move rook f c8. Now once again, as I was watching this game live, I was pretty much screaming for this move knight to c8 followed by knight d6 to be played, simply because the knight can go to e4, maybe c4, and it just feels like all these ideas with knight c5 and b4 are a little bit less effective when you can always offer the trade of the knights. Instead we get rook f c8. Nepo plays rook c8, Ding plays rook to a3 here. Now I don't know if this move is necessarily the absolute best move. You could have maybe even just gone knight b3 right away. Nonetheless, nothing wrong with it. We get bishop to g6, and now Nepo has to retreat the bishop to try and get the knight to d6 via f5. Now again, the rook on c8 is not actually doing anything here, and so already at this point it starts to feel very scary to play. We get knight b3, knight to c6 played here by Nepo. Now this move I think is just a mistake. Frankly, I think he still should try to play knight f5 and then put the knight on d6. Maybe white can play bishop d3 and claim an advantage, but after knight h4 and bishops come off the board, you go back to f5, and with only one pair of knights on the board, even though white is for choice here, I still think black has pretty good chances to hold the game. Nonetheless, we get knight to c6. Now we get queen to g3 being played by Ding. An excellent move. Another thing that is very understated about matches between top players is there's this very critical psychological point of understanding your opponent's style. Now first of all, Ding has clearly understood that Nepo does not play this Caro-Kann variation, these exchange Caro-Kann variations with these pawn chains from f7 to d5 and b2 to d4. But additionally, he understands that Nepo does not like to play defensive positions. Nepo is not somebody who will try to defend and hold a slightly worse position for many hours. Players like Fabiano or Magnus are more than happy to try and defend slightly worse positions, but Nepo doesn't really like doing that. He's always looking for counterplay. He wants to have some kind of aggressive plan, and in general that's how he plays. So when Ding plays queen g3 here, it's a very, very important move, because here black should probably just allow the trade of the queens and play something like rook c7. But again, Nepo does not like passive positions where there's no counterplay, nothing happening. Now the computer of course doesn't particularly care. White is better here, but black is very much in the game with moves like knight e7, rerouting the knight to d6, or even frankly going to e7 and rerouting the other way to d6. And black is still worse, but it's not the end of the world. But again, Nepo does not like these sorts of positions. He wants to have something aggressive, some sort of counterplay. Like, he won't mind losing a game, but he wants to have that counterpunch, so in case his opponent makes a mistake, he can win the game. So after knight b3, we got knight c6, queen g3 played here by Ding, queen to e7, rejecting the trade. Now we get h4, an excellent move being played here. I really like this move. Maybe not the absolute best move, but there's no need to be hasty with knight to c5, because after knight takes a5, even though white is better here with rook takes a5 b6, for example, actually this is the wrong line, rook takes a5 b6 would be equalizing, and white could take on e6, rook c6, rook a5, rook e6. And while white is still a little bit better in this position with rook e5, with only queens, rooks, and bishops on the board, and only one obvious weakness for black with a pawn on d5, you should have good drawing chances. So Ding is not hasty. He plays h4. He shows some great patience to just try to improve his position on the king side. Maybe h5 is an idea. Maybe you just need the square on h2 for the king, but there's nothing wrong with being patient, because you can always play knight c5 on a later turn. So we get rook to e8 being played by Nepo, and this move was played quickly, by the way. He played this after a couple of minutes, and at this point I started to realize one important thing, which I'm sure Ding has already realized in the match based off of game 3, which is that when Nepo gets nervous or he's not sure what's going on, he starts moving very quickly. Now, as we know, in game number 3, he played about 4 or 5 moves almost instantly and lost the game very quickly. And when I saw this rook e8 move, I started to realize that Nepo was going to end up in a lot of trouble. Now, this move does not make a whole lot of sense, but as I said before, Nepo is looking for counterplays, looking for a way to complicate the situation and induce an error from his opponent. So we get knight to c5 being played here by Ding. Excellent move. Now the idea behind rook a3 sort of shows itself. He wants to go rook b3 and go after the pawn on b7. Nepo plays e5 pretty quickly once again. Now this is a big mistake here, but Ding does not capitalize. Ding plays this move rook b3. What Ding should have played here was this move pawn to d4 to overprotect the knight on c5. For example, if you try to take the pawn, you lose the pony. So after b4, if black plays e4, white can now play f3 here, trying to break this pawn chain, and it's very, very hard to play. You've got this great knight on c5, which is also putting pressure on the pawn on e4, as well as the pawn on b7, and I think from a practical standpoint, black is close to loss. Now again, a computer might find some way to keep the game going, but for all intents and purposes, no human would save this position, not even the current world champion Magnus Carlsen. However, Ding plays this move rook b3 very quickly. Now this is a mistake. It keeps an advantage for white, but nonetheless it's not as clear cut, and now there's a little bit of chaos on the board. We get knight takes pawn, rook takes e5, attacking the queen. Knight guards the rook, of course. Queen f6 is played, and now we have rook a3. Important move. Knight c4, takes, all pretty standard. If you don't take the knight on c4, black will capture one of the rooks. And now we got this move h5. Now h5 is a very slight mistake by Ding, but I don't fault him for playing it. Apparently knight takes b7 would have been a better move, because after rook takes e5, queen takes e5, queen takes h4, white can now play knight d6, and with this great bastion in the middle of the board, knight can jump and target the pawn on f7 and c4. Also knight e8 threatening mate in 1 on g7 is an important move as well. White should be clearly better, but Ding plays h5 here, because the idea is if black tries to trade the rooks, you can simply take with the pawn, and now the queen and the bishop are under attack. However, this is a big mistake here, because rook takes e5 is in fact a good move. Now Nepo did not use a lot of time. He used about 5 minutes before playing bishop c2, and this again speaks to the fact that Jan needs to just sit on his hands and use his time at critical moments in the game, because if he had found rook takes e5 and played queen to d8 here, black is actually completely fine. Black should never lose the game here. The reason is that when white takes the bishop, you go queen d1 check, king h2, queen h5. If white goes king g1, we have the classic right triangle forced repetition with queen d1 and h5, the classic yo-yo. And if white tries to play queen h3, avoiding the repetition, black takes the pawn with check, and then you lose the knight on the next turn, and with it you're suddenly down a pawn and in a lot of trouble here. So Jan uses 5 minutes and plays bishop c2. Now I also think that Jan, besides being nervous, besides it being a world championship match, he is feeling this need to try and put a lot of pressure on Ding Liren on the clock. I think he's feeling like Ding is capable of playing perfect moves, and so if Ding is capable of playing perfect moves, you want to get him low on time to induce a blunder. But again, at the end of the day, there are critical moments when you need to sit on your hands and think, and Nepo does not do that. Instead, he plays bishop c2, and it's also worth noting that at this point, with Ding having 34 minutes for approximately 12 moves or 13 moves, there is no chance of Ding flagging here. There's not enough chaos in the position. White can play rook a1, rook e1. The knight is very active. You're never going to flag your opponent here. So a very careless choice by Nepo to not use like 10 or 15 minutes to try and find the resource. Instead, he plays bishop c2 right away. Ding captures on b7. We get queen to b6, and now knight d6 is played. Now this move is not a double XAM move. I know chess.com analysis function says it is. It's just a very good move. But the problem is that now when the rooks come off the board, there's a big difference. When Ding played this move h5, if we go back to this position, he could have played knight b7 and had this exact same position right here, but after queen takes b2, you don't have time to play h5 and dislodge the bishop from g6. So like if white plays rook a5, now after takes in h5, for example, black can simply go bishop d3, and black is much better here. However, in the game, as we'll notice here, we reach the same position, but with the h5 bishop c2 inclusion, when you take on b2 and white plays rook a5, now if you go queen takes c3, you actually lose to this move knight to e8. Now with the bishop on d3, you wouldn't lose, because then you could just play f6, and I guess I should illustrate that. So just to show you guys what the difference is in this position, if we go back to this position right here where we get queen takes c3, h5, bishop d3, if you play knight to e8, black can simply play f6, actually not f6, sorry, black can play queen c1, king h2, and queen g5 to cover the mate. I got my lines confused, sorry about that. And black is completely fine. Now the reason this exists is because the bishop is on d3. So when we look at this position, bishop is on d3, so you have the check available. But once the bishop is on c2 in this position, you don't have that resource anymore. And so now if you play queen takes c3, knight to e8, and f6, for example, white takes, and after g takes f6, you have queen d5 check, creating the classic pyramid of Giza. And now if black moves the king to say h7, you go check, king goes back, and you gobble the rook with check, and then you can even just take the pawn on a6, and white is going to checkmate with the queen on a8 and the rook on a7 in the next couple of moves. So suddenly suddenly, because the h5 bishop c2 moves have been included, black is close to loss. Now Jan plays king h7 here, which is a very logical move, because if white plays knight to e8, for example, in this position, now you can sack the rook for the knight, and here you have queen c1 check. And with the king on h7 versus g8, the king's no longer in check. So after king h2, queen f4, now again we have more classic right triangles, more repetitions here, and the game simply will end in a draw. And if you go king h3, just to show you guys one more line, there's bishop f5 check, takes, king g3, and after a move like a5, for example, you have this outside pass pawn rolling up the board, you have queen d3 check, and black should be winning. So here Ding plays rook c5 after a relatively short think, uses 1 minute. Can't fault him for playing this move. He's getting a little bit low on time, doesn't really see a concrete win, so he plays this move. Now that being said, queen to e1 is winning, and the reason is now if black plays bishop d3, you can simply take the pawn on f7 and bring the knight to this great e5 square and create a great bastion. One example is say queen b6, rook a1, a5, knight e5. If black goes a4, you take, again, more pyramids, a check, and you win the rook here. And if black tries to play a move like rook to e8, for example, you can simply go queen c1, queen to a3, going after the pawn, and this bastion in the center is incredibly powerful. So Ding plays rook c5. I don't fault him for this move. We got queen c1 check played. Now here queen takes c3 is the best move, and after rook takes c4, you simply go queen d2 with the idea of queen d1 check. Again, the right triangle plays, and black should be okay according to the computer. But again, Nepo at this point trying to move fast, put pressure on the clock, so we get queen c1. King h2 is played, and now we get f6. Now this of course is a mistake here at this point. Probably you should have played queen d2, but we get f6, queen to g3 being played, and now we have pawn to a5. Now this move is insane. I will just say this move is completely insane, but it's very much in the style of how Jan is traditionally known for playing. Now in this position, any reasonable person would look at this position and say, well, white is material is even right here, but white has a raging attack. You have rook c7. Again, white has the right triangle threatening the checkmate and the kebab on the 7th rank. It feels really, really scary. So a normal person here would probably be like, okay, I'm probably going to play a move like bishop d3, try to guard the pawn. If white goes rook c7, I can play queen g5, and now this pawn should play with the rook behind it in the endgame. Additionally, if white tries to play like knight c4, for example, you could always just trade and play something like queen d1. And yes, after queen g6, king h8, rook c7, rook g8, it looks really scary here, but you still have chances because you have the outside pass pawn. You can always win one or both of these pawns. Also, even after rook a7, maybe you have queen d2, threatening to win the pawn on f2 as well. And there definitely are some practical chances to save the game. But instead, Jan plays this move a5. Now, I think if Ding Liren had maybe like 5 minutes here, this move would not be that bad, because Ding would suddenly probably panic because he sees his pawn rolling down the board. But with 18 minutes on the clock, this is just a completely impractical decision. And essentially now you're daring Ding to find the winning variation. Now Ding captures a pawn, we get a4, and here he correctly plays this move knight e3. Now this is a very, very good move, somewhat counterintuitive in fact, because right here you're looking at the knight preventing the pawn from pushing. So a move like rook c7 and looks much more logical. But after queen to g5, stopping the mate on g7, if you trade and go knight a3, black can play bishop d1. There are ideas like rook b8 and rook b3, and there's still great practical chances to save the game. So knight e3 is an excellent move by Ding, understanding that the pawn is simply too slow getting to the end of the board, and now you can reroute the knight to d5 and put a lot of pressure towards the pawn on f6 and the king on h7. So we get bishop to b1, played quickly by Nepo. Very surprising decision here. Now again, the best move is king h8. I don't really think that's realistic, but nonetheless, again, this move is played relatively quickly, and with 27 plus minutes on the clock, I do think Jan should have used his time better. You get rook c7, threatening the mate in 1, and now you also see the knight cuts off the queen from going to the g5 square. We get rook to g8, and now knight d5, threatening to play knight takes f6. There's one beautiful checkmate here with a3, where white can go knight takes f6 check, can't capture due to the rook, and after king h8, queen takes g7, rook takes g7, rook c8. Simply, there's going to be the classic Arabian checkmate with a tower and the horse. King is simply stuck in the corner of the board. So king to h8 is played by Nepo to stop knight takes f6. We get rook a7, a3, knight to e7 being played here. Now this is a very critical moment here, by the way, as well, that knight e7 is move number 40. So once Ding reaches move number 40 with 4 minutes, by the way, with 6 minutes or 4 minutes left on the clock when he plays this move, as you see, time pressure was not a big factor. So Jan's whole strategy of moving very fast to get Ding low on time, make a blunder, backfires horrendously, or spectacularly, I should say. Because now Ding plays knight e7, attacking the rook, and here we have this move rook f8. Now Computer thinks that after rook e8, it's not so simple for white to win, and the main reason is that now if white plays a move like d5 here, you can go a2, and you have a big problem with the rook attacking this knight on e7. Instead, we get this move rook f8. Now, it's worth noting that in this position, Ding uses a lot of time before playing his next move. The computer thinks that rook b7 is winning here, because if you go a2, another spectacular checkmate occurs after rook b8. Black gets a second queen on the board, but after rook f8, king h7, white sacks the queen with queen g6, and after bishop takes queen, pawn takes, this is also checkmate. King simply has no squares, and the rook covers the 2 squares on the back rank, and that's GG. So rook b7 would win. It's worth noting, however, that queen to f3 does not work here, because there's a very sad win for black after a2 rook a8, where black can sack his queen with queen f4, do a clean Botez gambit, take the queen, black wins the rook and makes a queen on a1 next move. And if you move the king, for example, after queen f3 takes king h7, taking the queen, black again gets a queen and wins the game as well. So rook e8 would have been a better move, also because one other line which I should show is that if white plays rook b7 here, trying to play rook b8, black has this incredible resource with queen to b2. And if white takes the queen, black is actually completely fine here, because you can't attack the pawn on b2. If you play a move like queen c7 now, I just quietly scoot the bishop back to h7 and make a queen on b1. Bishop guards the pawn, bishop will guard the queen as well, and it's simply game over. So it's very counterintuitive why rook e8 is better than rook f8, because of course there's rook b7. Nonetheless, rook f8 is played. Ding plays d5 here after a 20+ minute think. He does not find rook b7. Also worth noting here, rook b7 wins, because now if you go queen b2, after takes knight g6 check, forking the king and the rook. If you take the knight, I take the bishop, I move the queen back to b1 after rook b8, and it's game over. Additionally, if you move the king to g8, I can simply take, and when you move the bishop, there are many ways to win, but probably the simplest is just go knight e6, threatening checkmate in 1. So Ding plays d5 after a very long think, and Nepo uses all of 2 minutes on move number 41. He gets an extra hour on the clock, and he instantly plays a2, which just loses on the spot. Now in this position, this is winning for white here. However, black can play a move like queen to e1 and try to keep the game going. If white plays d6 here, now you have queen to e2, threatening the pawn on h5, and after white plays f3 and you go queen e3, white should be winning here after rook takes a3, but again, it's only 2 pawns, and with queen c5 hitting the pawn on h5 and the rook on a3, it's not completely over. Instead, Nepo plays a2 instantly, and now after queen c7, you can effectively resign. White is threatening to make the checkmate in 2 with knight g6 and queen takes g7. So if you play like a1 queen, I go check, you take the knight, and then I go queen g7, checkmate. So Nepo has to move the king to h7, and now we get knight to g6, threatening checkmate in 1 once again. Nepo plays rook g8, stopping the mate, and now after queen to f7 here, Nepo has to resign the game, because now the whole purpose behind this pawn push of d5 is made very clear. If black plays a move like queen to g5, for example, you sack the queen for the rook, and after king takes queen, there's rook a8 check. If you go to f7, I have rook f8 checkmate, knight guards the rook, pawn covers the squares, and it's checkmate. And if you go to h7, I have rook h8, which is also simply checkmate, with this pawn on h5 guarding the knight on g6. The only other option you have here is to take the knight, but after pawn takes bishop check, king h8, queen takes rook, king takes rook, and rook a8, this is also checkmate. King simply has no squares available, and it's game over. So after queen to f7, Nepo resigns the game, and with that, we have a tied match once again. The score is 3-3. Now, what do you want me to say about this game? I think what I will say is I think that in general, when I've been looking at the preparation, the approach, it's very clear to me that Nepo has done a lot of very heavy lifting in the main lines of various openings, but it seems like in some of these sidelines, perhaps the thought process or the choices haven't been the absolute best, and maybe Ding can actually win some games if he keeps playing these sidelines. I think also for Nepo, he has to find a way to control his nerves. He cannot be playing all these moves instantly. He's made too many instant moves in several of these games now, which have cost him. He might have lost this game no matter what today, but in game 3 specifically, if he had not been moving instantly, I don't think he would have lost that game. So for Nepo, he's got to control his nerves. For Ding, we're seeing that Ding is bouncing back from adversity 2 times now in this match, where it seemed like he could have been down and out. So he's showing great resilience, and he's back in the match. It's anyone's ball game now with the match 3-3. I also think it's worth noting that the former world champion Vladimir Kramnik had a very important statement. He said that in this match, he expects there to be a lot of twists and turns that could go back and forth, and we are definitely seeing that. And so I felt like Nepo had kind of stabilized after winning yesterday, but after seeing the game today, it's very clear to me that this is a complete toss-up. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm overvaluing Nepo's opening preparation relative to the general practicality of certain moves, decisions, time usage, etc. So anyone's ball game, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. At any rate, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap of game number 6. We have a tied ball game, 3-3, 4 decisive games, just what the fans wanted. So I'll be back with a game 7 recap the day after tomorrow. But I hope you've enjoyed this recap. For now, make sure to hit that subscribe button below, and we'll be back very, very soon with more great content here on YouTube. See you guys. Bye.